For our presentation, we have Maureen Lamb. Maureen is the Language Department Chair and Upper School Classics faculty at Kingswood Oxford School in West Hartford, Connecticut, the Google Certified Trainer, and works with the Google Suite, Google Certification, Applied Digital Skills. And Maureen is a frequent presenter at COLT, the Connecticut Conference of Language Teachers, at NECTFL and ACTFL. She's been awarded numerous commendations for her excellent work in Latin pedagogy, world language pedagogy, methodology, and the digital platform. So tonight we welcome Maureen for a very timely presentation. Maureen will take it away. We have the chat feature going. So myself, Melissa Wallace, and Elisa are here, and we are ready to help field the questions. So Maureen, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We've been in the trenches with this for a little while. So today I'm going to really focus on strategies that I think are working well in the. I've been teaching remotely, but I teach students that are hybrid and in person at the same time. And so this is really going to go over methods that work best when you have students that are both in person and online. And I don't know, let's do a show of hands. How many people are doing some sort of hybrid model, or it could be something that's coming around the bend? If you want to do a little thumbs up too in the reactions, you can do that. Okay, awesome. Oftentimes when I'm doing Zoom meetings with my students, I encourage reactions, especially if students turn their cameras off. I think it's totally fine for students to turn their cameras off as long as they can show they're engaged. And so a lot of the things I'm going to be going over are ways for students to demonstrate their engagement, even if their cameras are off, not in the classroom. And so I think that's important. And so again, if you want to follow along, I've put the tiny URL in the chat box. It's also right here, tinyurl.com/idioma November 16th. And so Mike did a great job introducing me, but I just wanted to say hi again, Maureen Gassert-Lamb. I'm the Language Department Chair and Academic Technology Coordinator at the Kingswood Oxford School in West Hartford, Connecticut. I'm a Google Certified Trainer, and I'm very active on Twitter at Latin Tech Tools. Also, if you have questions about anything from tonight and you are shy about asking at the end or want to follow up with something and go into more depth about something, please feel free to email me, latintechtools@gmail.com, and I will be happy to help you. So why did I make a reference to Next Gen? Did anybody else know that this was a reference to Star Trek: The Next Generation? No? Oh, well, Star Trek: The Next Generation. In Star Trek, Captain Luke Picard is kidnapped by the evil Borg, who try to turn him into a cyber person. And that's how some of us are feeling right now. We're so used to being teachers in person that we're becoming part cyber as we're teaching these hybrid students too. And so we have to use that tech that we have to use now to make us stronger. And the Borg slogan, which even if you haven't seen Next Gen, I'm sure you've heard, resistance is futile. We have to use technology right now. We have to accommodate those remote students. And so this is timely because we have to make it the best of both worlds, which is the name of the episode. We have to make it so that our students who are in the classroom are getting the best socially distant experience possible, while our students at home are all centered and included. So that's what it's all about. And sorry for the nerdy reference. So again, are connected through Zoom and others will be in the room. So I've had students that they don't like being called a remote. That idea seems very distant to them. So I think it was Meredith White who started calling them Zoomies and Roomies. And I just thought that was so smart because that really helped them to feel like, okay, I'm not a remote student.
Nothing.
Virtual student, I'm a real student. And so Zoomies and Roomies might be a good way to refer to them as we go through this. And something to keep in mind is when we center those students that are learning on Zoom, everyone benefits. When we change how we do things so that we're centering those students that are online, it's helpful for everybody. So keep that in mind as we go through these things. We're going to go through some essential elements of hybrid learning. The first is organization. And I could probably talk for 3 hours about just how to organize it. I find myself working harder than I probably have since I started teaching, because I've been trying to figure out ways to organize it. And at the beginning of the year, I was staying up till midnight doing all this stuff. But as I got to the hang of it, I've come up with some easier ways to do it. But the most important thing is to stay organized and help students stay organized, help them stay on track. If students are missing classes due to illness or due to not being able to attend, it's important that they can stay organized and know what they missed. Another really important element is community engagement. Last spring, what I heard most from students is they want to engage with each other. While that can be really difficult with social distancing, we have to think of ways that students can engage with each other. Creating a feedback loop. I've said it before, the more that we can give feedback to students and get feedback from students, the better off we're going to be. We're going to talk a little bit about assessment and how assessment can look in this hybrid situation. And finally, a bit on student choice and voice. So organization. Very, very important. And I start out every day with a wayfinding document. Now I have a Big Dipper here or some major. A wayfinding document, I think of it as the stars to guide the class by. It's a way that we can center the classroom so that students understand what's going on. So I'm going to show you a wayfinding doc. Let me know if you can see this. You should be able to see it. Okay, so this is an example of a wayfinding doc that I might get. I found this example online earlier this summer, and I am ashamed to admit I'm not sure where it came from, but I'm happy to send you a template if you're interested. It has all of the dates on the side. If you go into present mode with it, you can actually click through each date. My students really appreciate this because even though I use Google Classroom, they like having everything in one place for the day. And so I have the first activity. This has links to everything we're going to do during the day, everything. And so they can just go through and we will review, we'll go through slides. It has links to all the slide decks, has links to all the activities, and it has a link to their homework. And so that's really helpful at centering students. There is no question about what we're doing in class. If a student comes in late, they can still follow along and see what we're doing. And there is the homework right there for them. And I'm calling the synchronous work the work we're doing together, and the asynchronous work the work they're doing as what would traditionally be homework. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, why are you doing this? It's so repetitive. Believe me, it helps students stay focused. It helps students understand what's going on that day even better than Google Classroom. Because I don't know about you, but on Google Classroom, my students do the to-do list and that's about it. They don't look at anything else. And so it's really important to have a place where they can be centered and organized like this. All right, any questions before I move on? Oh yeah, absolutely. Amelia, feel free to email me at latintechtools@gmail.com. It's also linked in the slides. So if you wanna just make a copy, that's totally fine with me. And if you need a little more help on how to format it, let me know too. Okay, let me just keep going. Okay, let me make this big. Is it a big one now? Okay. Oh, I see questions in the chat box. Oh no, I lost the chat box. There it is. Hold on one second. Okay, awesome. Oh, sorry, it's tinyurl.com/idioma NOV16. So let me share that again. If anyone came in late, here you go. Feel free to follow along.
Thanks, Maureen. I'll a couple times as we go through, I'll just keep resharing it.
Thank you. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about Google Classroom. Now, there are a lot of different ways you can organize Google Classroom to be effective for your students. The most important thing is that it's working for your students. So sometimes it can be very, very helpful to have student feedback on how you organize. I'm organizing right now by homework choice boards, assessments, end of week check-ins, Zoom links, Quizlets, homeworks, and I put an additional category called past homework because it seems to confuse students if there's homeworks all together. Flipgrids, resources, and their wayfinding docs. So I think this can be really, really helpful for students. However, what works for your students and you is what is most important. You can organize by unit, you can organize by document, you can organize by date. I have a friend who does every single day is a different topic. It gets repetitive, but then they archive it. So really, it's what works for you and your students. So whatever learning management system you're using, make sure your students understand how it's being used. That's really the goal. Now, what I was talking about before, community engagement, making sure students have opportunities to work with each other. even if it's something silly to start class or something where they get a little socializing time. I think it's really powerful to give them opportunities for this. And so I'm going to give some very concrete examples. First, introductions and check-ins. At the beginning of the year, I like to do introductions on Flipgrid, but I also give students opportunities to do check-ins through Flipgrid. I know sometimes students are not as comfortable speaking with a mask on. I know sometimes they're just not as comfortable expressing themselves in front of the big group. And so giving them an opportunity to speak on something like Flipgrid can be very powerful. And I'm just gonna look in the chat quickly. Okay, great. And so some ideas at the beginning of the year, have students introduce themselves, give their pronouns, their name. And I also ask what would they wish their superpower might be, just because it's a fun conversation starter. When I have students do this, they can do their readings and summarize it in the target language using Flipgrid, and also doing debates and responses. I also like that Flipgrid has just updated to allow text responses both for teacher comments and student comments. So that's a really cool new feature that you can utilize with your students. So it's a great feature and it's free. Flipgrid is free, so it's a great one to check out. Next, we're gonna go over some warm-ups. These are also community engagement. So this is one that I was using a ton at the beginning of the year. When students were just warming up, their language skills weren't like super strong because they had had a whole summer. And so I was doing this a lot with them. And so we were playing Quid Placatibi, what's pleasing to you? And so in small groups, they were saying which they preferred, then they were presenting what their partners said. And so for the first slide, I would have them present someone else from their group. For the second slide, I would have them raise their hand to say their preference. And then for the third slide, they just say what their preference was in the target language. And so in their free time, do they prefer to sleep or exercise? Or I had some students who just said nothing. Not really sure what that is. Do they like to take a bath or a shower? That was a very interesting conversation. And finally, do they prefer chocolate or sweets? And so again, something that's just kind of a little bit fun. They get to know each other a little bit, something where they could share their likes and dislikes, but in a way that's harmless and hopefully doesn't make them feel uncomfortable at all, but gets to know each other a little. Next. This is something that I called God Match. And I'll show you what it is we were reading about the ancient Roman gods. And so one of the ideas as students were reading a chapter for homework, and then they came in the next day and they worked together to try to match what each god was the god of, which is what the chapter said. And so what I do for these is I put pictures on the outsides of the slide, and then I have the students drag. So let's say this is an owl and I'm trying to put it under Minerva. I would drag it there. So my students would have all the pictures off the slide to start like this. And so they'd have to scroll up and down. And so Mars would have the sword. Venus would have love. And the hammer would go to Vulcan, and so on. And so students could debate with their partners after reading the reading from the night before, which went with which god. And that's what the reading was about. You can do this with all sorts of things. I'm going to show you a couple of more examples of this where you can kind of have pictures dragged. I highly recommend if you're going to do this with Google Slides, you do not use a text box. Don't use a text box, use shapes or pictures. I find that those are much easier to drag. If you use a text box, so you end up making a huge text box and it gets very frustrating very quickly. But you can use this for a number of different, I'm sure the wheels are already turning of how you could use this in your classroom. Here's a couple more examples, not exactly the same, but similar ideas. Here we go. The next one is Map of Gaul. So my students are just starting to read Caesar Book 1 right now. And so I wanted to see if they understood from the readings what the map looked like. And you can do this if you're trying to do a cultural topic as well. And so, or anything like that. So what I did was I put a blank map on the Google slide. Then I put a series of locations. And then students had to drag the locations to the map. And so they had to figure out where the Pyrenees Mountains are. And again, these are not text boxes, these are shapes because they drag so much more nicely. And so Pyrenees Mountains are roughly here. Oh, there we go. Aquitania is above it. And I should have made them a little bit smaller, but they got the drift. Italy, they all got Italy right. And so with partners, they were discussing this. And it's nice because They could go back to the reading. I saw them reading the Latin, trying to figure it out together, and going through and studying the map. So I thought that was a fun activity. This is actually something my students did today, and they had a lot of fun doing this. You could do this with lots of different things. So let me see. Again, the same idea, dragging and dropping. And I asked my students, does this get boring or repetitive? And they said, absolutely not. It's so nice to have a little break where you're dragging and dropping things and kind of, you feel like it's almost more hands-on than traditional things. And so they've been really loving these. Here's another one that I've been using. This class. And what I did was I had students read a passage that included a series of different places in Greek. And so, for example, they have to figure out, is Crete, a river, a city, or an island? And so Crete is an island. So they would take this and they would move this over to the column that said island. And so because my Greek learners are Greek 1, they're very new to this and they're just learning the language. This gave them an opportunity to use their knowledge of the Greek alphabet to sound things out and then figure out what it might be. And so this is nice. It's a way for students to kind of characterize things and really categorize them in a way that they can understand what the words are. And so this has been fun. I've done this in a couple of classes now, and it's been neat. Here's another one, a word sort. Now, another thing, this is for my Greek class, and students are very new to the language. So this would be good for more of a beginner class. We've read the story together, and now we're trying to figure out which words go in which categories. So again, these are all shapes, and I have students drag each word to the shape they belong to while they're reading the story. They have a hard copy of the story, or they're reading it on their screen. They get to choose. And so I provide all the words in advance. And so, so they can just drag them. And let's see, do I have any? No, they still have all of them there. But yeah, so they, again, these are little shapes so that you can drag them around so easily.
We have a question, Maureen, from Angela. Do you assign slides for students?
Oh, yes. I either do it this way where I've assigned them, or I use comment adding. So for this one, I didn't. I think it's because these students always know they're the same slide by now. But if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to assign this slide to me, I would do an @ and an email. And if you work in an institution that uses Google, it will actually assign that right away, assign to me, and I'm going to get an email saying this is my assigned slide. However, I always do a backup slide that says slide assignments just in case, because I feel like that helps them in case they forget or they accidentally resolve the comment. Oh, I see more in the chat box. Okay. And so, yes. Oh, no, you can absolutely, the shapes are text boxes. So let me show you. Someone had a question on that. So if I'm going to insert a shape, any shape, let's say I want to insert triangle. Here's a triangle, and I can just type in it. It's the same as a text box, except they move easier. Excellent question.
Angela's wondering, can they still toggle to other students' work?
They can, but I can see them because I'm on the dock at the same time. So I'll say, oh, you know, Mary, you shouldn't be on Bella's slide right now. Or if they're working together, I just keep an eye on that. So when they're working, that I keep an eye on the left-hand side there and figure out, okay, who's on the correct slide. So I can see what slide they're on the whole time, and I can ask them about it if they're not on the right slide. I wish we could make slides private. I've been asking Google this for a while, but unfortunately it's a no-go so far. But maybe someday that would be cool, because they already have private Google Sheets. So that's why I know they could do it for slides if they really wanted to. Generally speaking, though, I find that if I assign the slide to a student and they're doing their work effectively and I can see they're on the slides, they're not going to be looking at each other's as much, hopefully. Here has been a huge hit this year, the quote game. Has anyone played this before? Oh, okay. So I read a lot of novellas in my class, but I've actually started doing this for Latin literature. So I'm starting to do this with Caesar. This is for tomorrow's class. And so using quotes from the last 2 sections, find quotes for each situation. And they may not repeat what another group has said. So I do this one in small groups. And so they had to find something from the text that could be a newspaper headline. And they write where their group is. So let's say they're group number 1, they write it in here. And then when they're finished, they drag the shape onto the slide like that. So that way they don't see each other's as much and they can really focus on their quotes. Another one would be an advertising slogan, a refrain from a pop song, which could be very funny coming from Julius Caesar. A note you would not want to find. My favorite is one I did earlier this year is something you wouldn't want to overhear in the bathroom. And I got some really interesting answers on that one. And a tweet. So I have a bunch of these. If you're feeling creative and want to create your own, go for it. If you're saying, Maureen, I want your templates, let me know. I have 3 different ones I can share. And it's just creative ideas. If you play this and you come up with ideas, let me know. I'd be happy to steal ideas. My students said their favorite was coming up with their own Netflix show because they came up with some wild ideas from the text there. So, oh, and if you want templates, email me, latintechtools@gmail.com, or go to the presentation. I have this one on there, but there are 2 more for the quote game. Again, this is for class tomorrow, so it's gonna be fun, I hope. They love this game. Next is cartoon caption match. I've had some really good luck with this this year, which has been exciting. What I do is, this is for the Cambridge Latin course. So I actually take screenshots of text. I'm not sure how legal it is, but they're all using the textbook. So what they do is they've already read this as homework and they have to drag the quotes to match each picture. And so, yes, these are disturbing pictures, but it's the Latin textbook. So they have to drag the Latin text that is describing each picture. Again, usually the pictures are not this weird. And so it's fun because they have to guess and they have to show that they can read the Latin. And for this one, I had them work individually so I can make sure they did their homework. So it's like a little mini homework check. And so that's really nice. And again, anything you can do with dragging and pictures seems to be a big hit and really engages students. This is one of my favorite things to do. It takes forever to make and students go through it so quickly, but once in a while it's a great treat. And you can have my template because a lot of this was just me making the template. So if you want to steal this, please do. And so students will read the Latin and then they would click a choice. So it's choose your own adventure. I used to love those books growing up. And so this is the choose your own adventure in Google Slides. Each slide is linked to another slide. And so when you say yes, you go to this slide. And then when you say this, you go to another slide. And so a lot of it, again, it took me a really long time to make this because I was trying to create this. But if you want this, let me know and I will share it with you. And so they love this and everybody has a happy ending. Either the vampire is excited because he got to eat, or the person survived, or the ghost is happy because he gets to eat the guy. And so, you know, it's silly. And they did this for Halloween and they had a really good time doing it.
Maureen,
yes.
We have a question down in the chat. When you do slide assignments, is each student's slide the same or do they each have something different?
They each have the same thing. You could do it so they each have something different if you wanted to, though. The ones I'm showing are all the same, but you could absolutely do something different if you wanted to do that. So again, use mine because the payoff will be much greater than if you try to do it yourself. Okay. Brainstorming on Jamboard. Who here has used Jamboard? So my students really like this for brainstorming and it's gotten so much more functional than it used to be, which is great. Usually the app was so good this summer, but then when you would go to the computer version, it was not as nice. And so now I find that adding images is so nice. Using the disappearing laser is very cool. I also like that you can do multiple ones and switch back and forth. Again, slides is my jam. Slides is what I enjoy the most, but I can see why a lot of people are using Jamboard. Also, the ability to scribble and use pen is really helpful to a lot of students. So I'll assign 2 kids to a Jamboard and have them work on Jamboard like they do on slides. However, I really prefer Google Slides just because I enjoy it. But this is nice with adding pictures, with adding text. They can do the same with slides, but I think that they sometimes enjoy this as like kind of a brain dump. Like, let's do a little bit of practice for our presentation and just talk about all of our ideas on the Jamboard. And so they'll share it with me, or I'll put in extra jams. I think it's 20 jams you can do at once. And so you can assign kids different jams to work on. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, they're less likely to look through each other's jams, but so just like slides though, they would have access to each other's jams. It's not a closed off system. So I end up playing a lot of games as my brain breaks. I know brain breaks are supposed to have their brains take a little break from whatever they're doing and do something a little different. And so I'm using a lot of our friend Kahoot. By the way, if you're using Kahoot, I highly recommend the disco version. It's so much fun. My students like totally jam out to the disco music. So there's just a lot of different music options if you want to do this. Disco's fun, but Kahoot is great. I find kind of in the middle of class to get students super engaged, even if it's just questions. I feel that that can be really helpful for students, just to kind of break it up and do something a little different. I was just told about Gimkit. I had to stop using it because some students had issues with the idea that money was involved a couple of years ago when I was working on it, but I'm gonna have to try Gimkit. That's a great suggestion. Here's an example of a type of Kahoot I might use in class. I really embrace the pictures, and okay, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. Because one of the Latin words in here is a word cum, I keep getting it reported for Kahoot. And so, yeah, I swear it's not a naughty Kahoot. And so here I've been using a lot of pictures. And so that's been super helpful. Students say they're way more engaged when I use pictures. And I'm asking questions about something that's kind of weird and, you know, not very exciting. It's comparatives and superlatives, but I'm asking different questions about comparatives and superlatives. I'm not asking the same question every time. And I'm adding silly dinosaurs and stuff. Sometimes the picture has something to do with the question. Sometimes I just want them to pay more attention. And so either way, the pictures seem to engage students that much more. So that's why I've been doing that. So
Maureen,
yeah.
is there a way, I wonder if it would be worth looking into reaching out to Kahoot about setting language. So ahead of time, setting the language to Latin so that maybe you don't end up having that issue. But that is funny and unfortunate because you're really trying to use it for a good purpose here.
Right. And I do set the languages to Latin, but I think it's not, something tells me Latin's not really on their radar as much. So just a shocker there, I know. And also you can assign Kahoots as homework. I have heard the caveat though, that once you have winners, it's hard for them to complete the Kahoot. So I did assign it for homework a couple of times and students had fun with that. Quizlet is my go-to. I feel like this whole kind of hybrid teaching, I've been really relying heavily on Google Slides and Quizlet. They're my go-tos for everything. And so Quizlet is awesome. It's probably the most accessible for students and they love Quizlet Live. Quizlet Live is just amazing. And so I want to show you some example Quizlets that I like to use in my class. One is a map Quizlet. And so for this, students would be doing locations on a map. You could do this for pictures. So I've had colleagues who will show a scene, either an historical scene or a scene like something people do in the park and have them understand that in the target language, just using the picture, which is really nice because then you're not doing target language to L1. Instead, you're doing target language to picture. So there's something really nice about that. So that's something you can do. And you can play Quizlet Live with using this as well. So that's really fun. Here's another one. I do a lot of text in context. I try really hard not to have text that's not contextualized. And
started work at 6 a.m. my day job.
And so this, when I'm going to be asking students things, I like it to be in context. And this, I seem to have deleted the diagram for, but this had a diagram of text. I can share the real one with you on the board later. Uses of rich text. I think that Quizlet does a really good job with rich text in terms of giving options for it. So for example, you can do underlining, bold, and highlight if you have a teacher account for Quizlet, which is, I think it's about $30 a year, which is really nice. And so that's nice because you can ask these contextualized questions. So I really like that about Quizlet. I think that's a really good feature for students. And finally, uses of pictures. And again, I love using pictures. In this case, this is a Greek face. And so these are all parts of the face. I also do this with diagrams and text. So what I'll do is instead of putting a picture, I'll put a screenshot of a text. And then students will have to tell me the vocabulary word in context, what the vocabulary word is in the context of the text. So that's really, really helpful.
Maureen, we have a question here. Do you know if you can use pictures with the free account?
I don't actually. That's a good question. I think you can use diagrams, but they might be limited. There might be a limited number of diagrams you can use. I'll have to look into that. I don't know. Good question. And another thing I really like about Quizlet is the option for asynchronous, timed, and untimed review for students. My students love using their phones for everything. And so if they're on their Quizlet app, they can choose to do a timed thing, they can do gravity match, or they can do something that's untimed like learn or flashcards. And so I think that can be really helpful for them. And so I highly recommend having them explore that. Also, you can create classes in Quizlet. If you need more information about this, let me know. I'm doing some work for Quizlet right now, and so I'm happy to share some videos with you. Flippity is so much fun. If you have not discovered Flippity, it really is making Google Sheets happy. Hi. And so happy Google Sheets. So you create it in a Google Sheet. This is what it looks like. Then you have to publish it to the web. And so you do that by going to File and Publish to the web, which is pretty easy. Then it gives you a link under Get Link Here. And you can go to that link and it'll show you the game board. And it's basically like a Jeopardy game. And I play this with hybrid students, and I pair up students who are online and I pair up students who are in person. And I have them communicate over text, since they all seem to text each other anyway. And so I actually ask in advance, like, who has each other's phone numbers, so that they can do this. But it really is fun. You can make team names. It's a good camaraderie thing. So not only is it a game, but it's another social engagement opportunity. I don't use breakout rooms for this. That's why I use texting, because I find that breakout rooms, they can't see the board, so that's a disadvantage. So I would use either texting or assign each group a Google Doc that they can type on, or a Jamboard or something like that, something where they can do kind of brain idea dump. And so they can come up with an answer together. You could also, if you have a tiny class, make them all a different team, just depending on what you want to do with that. Anyway, Flippity is really fun. And there's a lot of different things to do with Flippity. So I wanted to show you the Flippity excuse me, website as well. So you can do game shows, random name picker, scavenger hunt's really fun. Matching game can be really fun too. What's the one I really like to do? Oh, word clouds are super fun. And self-assessments are cool too. So there's a lot of different things you can do with Flippity, especially if you're someone who likes sheets. Google Sheets can be really, really fun.
Do you need an account, Maureen? Do the kids need an account for Flippity? Or
No.
can you assign, you can lead it and they don't need to sign up for it?
They don't need to sign up or do anything. They just need to watch. It's really nice.
That's great.
The only thing they have to do is communicate with each other somehow. And again, with in-person students, it's pretty easy. With students who are hybrid, I'm having them, or my Zoomies instead of my roomies are texting. And so that's been helpful. Feedback loop has been a big deal for me this year. I think it's really important to give and get feedback. And so it's been really important for me to be able to do that. Sometimes it's easy to just speak. And so something I've been using is Moat. Moat is available in Google Comments for docs and slides. And so I'm just gonna go to a Docker slide. Let me go back to a Docker slide so I can show you. Docker slide, where are you?
It also works in Google Classroom, Maureen.
Oh, fantastic. I didn't know it worked in Classroom. That's so good to know. Cool.
It's a Chrome extension, so you can just.
That's true. So I use it generally in comments. And so, oh, come on, load. Of course, I picked the hardest one to load, the choose your own adventure one. Oh, I'm in the wrong account, so I don't have it. I have it in my school account. Darn, oh well. Anyway, Mode extension, if you want more on it, email me. It's right in the comments if you install it. So if you go to the link for it, for Moat, I think I gave it to you there. Sorry, let me jump ahead. You can install it. I think you get 30 seconds free, which is so nice. So if you don't want to give written feedback, if you like to give oral feedback, it's a really nice thing to have as a tool at your disposal. Pear Deck is another one. There's a free version of Pear Deck. I have the premium version just because I really like when students draw, but the free version is really good too. And there's tons of templates you can use. It's really nice because I like using the asynchronous version so that students can work at their own pace. Oh, thank you for sharing the Moat thing. And so here's an example of a Pear Deck that I might use in class. So this is a story that my students have already read. So this is kind of their second wave through it. And so first off, I like to do a stress check. There we go. Stress checks are really good, especially with students at this time, just so I can see where they are. And I make this optional. They don't have to do this one, but I like to do this asynchronously so they don't see each other's answers, especially for the stress check. I think it's important to keep that anonymous, but I really like giving students opportunities to kind of let me know how they're doing. And also the what's filling your bucket today and what's draining it. And I usually do Pear Deck in two different ways. So this is one way I might do a Pear Deck, draw how Jupiter feels. And so then a student would draw on the slide what they think Jupiter's feeling. Or I could do the text and an illustration on one slide and then the Pear Deck question on the next slide. It really depends on what I'm doing with the students that day and what seems to be the best solution. Also having students write responses. So I tend to do either writing responses or drawing responses. When I do other things, I tend to just use Google Slides with drag and drop rather than doing the matching for Pear Deck, just because it's easier. But there are a ton of templates on there if you want to explore and look around. And again, this is an add-on for Google Slides, so it actually shows up as Pear Deck like that. And it's so easy, it pops up there. And even if you have the free version, there's templates you can use. And again, I don't have the free version here, excuse me, so I can't use draw or drag, but I can use all the other items here. So Pear Deck is great. And again, I like asynchronous mode. You can use synchronous mode, which is when you push a slide to all the students to work on it once. So all the students can be working on the same slide at the same time. I like to let students work at their own pace because we have so many opportunities in class for students to do things all together. It's nice for them to kind of do their own pace and you can follow along what they're doing. And best of all, they added feedback. So if you see a student's behind or a student's having trouble with something, you can type feedback to them on Pear Deck. That's super helpful. Again, asynchronous mode can help students to work at their own pace, get feedback, and take some of that pressure off. Google Slides. I basically told you Google Slides are my favorite. They're the Swiss Army knife of the Google Suite. You can do everything with them. And so I'm going to show you some kind of class activities I might do using Google Slides, again, to do the feedback loop. So I can give students some things to look at, and then they can give me feedback on how they're doing by showing me what they know. And so here I had students read a text, and then they had to find, it actually ended up being 4 words or phrases. There we go. That demonstrate Caesar's opinion and what might that opinion be. And so they each were assigned their own slide and they had to put what the Latin was that they thought and what Caesar's judgment was based on that Latin. So it's really setting them up for the AP essay. It's comparative essay type stuff, but these are Latin 3 students. So they're just like, oh, where's Caesar showing judgment? Where is he showing what he thinks of things? And so it was a very cool activity and students really enjoyed it. And it gave them an opportunity to kind of think about what words, what diction Caesar was using to demonstrate judgment. And so they had fun with that one. Let's see, here's some more. So relative pronouns, these are Greek relative pronouns, but relative pronouns in general, they're not a very relative pronoun topic. I don't know, I get excited about relative pronouns. My students, not so much. And so there are a lot of relative pronouns in Caesar 1.1 and 1.2. And so, oh no, it's the wrong link. Relative pronouns. Okay, we'll just find it, hold on. Give me 1 second. My apologies, mea culpa. Let's go to the drive. So this is relative, I'll change the link after this, my apologies.
No worries, take your time.
Oh,
We did a little behind the scenes with the master. We all have VIP tickets right now, Maureen.
VIP to my very messy Google Drive.
That's great. Makes us all feel human too. Thank you.
All about the search button, right? And so relative pronouns, again, not the crazy exciting topic you might think, except if you'll ever load. There you go. I found a really ridiculous video about relative pronouns in Latin. Oh yes, if you're a Latin teacher, please look up High Pause. It's a guy who films videos that has crazy music and he has lots of cats. My students actually gave me this feedback. They wanted more videos so that when they went back after class, they could go back and watch videos to help them. And so I've been trying to find a lot of resources online for them. So I started out class by showing little bits of videos. Then I gave them a chart. And I'm not a chart person. I'm not a huge chart fan, but I have some students who are serious chart fans. And so I'll say, here's a chart, look at it. You will never reproduce this for me, but just look at it and see and admire it. Ooh, the beauty of the chart. And so then students with a partner would underline all the relative pronouns and then insert an arrow. And this is where it got fun. They had so much fun doing this silly activity of finding relative pronouns, underlining them, and inserting arrows. And first off, some of them had never inserted an arrow before. It's pretty easy. You go to insert, shape, arrow. And they enjoyed color coding and trying to figure it out. And they were referencing, they were like going back to the chart, like, okay, what is this? And we had talked about it. So they were going over their translations that we had done the class before. And it just made it a little bit more fun for them. And then they were telling me about the trials and tribulations of making quibus cum matched Germanis with their arrow. And I said, these are good life skills. Now you know how to do arrows in Google Slides. And so they were telling me they were going to impress their other teachers with it, which is kind of fun. So anyway, that's the kind of activity I like to do. Again, it's all contextualized. It's all within the text, but it makes it a little more interesting. Then let's go over all the relative pronouns, like, ooh, find an arrow to it. Here's comparatives and superlatives. Again, not the most exciting topic. You saw my Kahoot on it. I had to do lots of dazzle pictures to make it interesting. For this one, I had students, and these are all I've done the last day or two. So again, starting out, giving students some videos, in fact, lots of videos. That one's a weird video. Teddy bears on the moon. Who knew they'd be about comparatives and superlatives? And so then I had students highlight the comparative and superlative adjectives and adverbs on each slide. And it was a race because I gave them a couple of minutes before the Kahoot. And so they were having a lot of fun with this. And then we played that Kahoot I showed you. So if they got this right, they had a leg up on that Kahoot. So I told them when they were playing Kahoot, they were going to play it on their phones so they could keep looking at this text so they could know in context where all those comparatives and superlatives were. And so that seemed to work out really well for students. And as they were doing this, I was going through and commenting like, oh, you might want to check that one. I've been using the comment box heavily and the chat box. And so when I commented, students would then resolve it because I said, if you don't want other students to see what your comments are, just resolve it when I write a comment. And that way I can give you feedback. Other students don't need to see it. And so that's really nice. And again, I can keep track of where the students are by looking at where their little names are on the slides. So lots of good things there. Again, finishing up with a Kahoot is always a good way to get them to do something. Gerunds and gerundives. So this I was giving it a little bit. They love those Giphy things so much. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do a really uncool topic and then you're gonna get to use those. And so again, we've had funny videos. We talked about gerunds and gerundives, verbal nouns and adjectives. We looked at a chart, we kind of looked at it. We were talking about the differences. Here we got a gerund, here we've got a gerundive. And then they had to drag each gerund to gerundive to match the picture. And so this was fun. This one's about preparing for 2 years and I got to use SpongeBob, got to use a little Star Wars here about weak minds. I got to use the Matrix for people who want to fight. People preparing by running out of grocery store in South Park, and then a Batman, people swearing an oath. And so all of this had to do, weirdly enough, with gerunds and gerundives and the phrases that had gerunds and gerundives in the text. But students just had a blast doing this and looking at the silly pictures. And so again, pretty simple activity. It's almost like captioning pictures, except with the moving pictures, but they had a lot of fun doing it. And it's all quotes from Caesar. And I put the running picture because running is one of the only gerunds I know about in English. I guess there are a lot of them, but running's my favorite. Cartoons. So my students love cartoons. I don't know about your students. So this is kind of like an app smash here. What students do is they make these in Google Drawing. I have a Google Drawing template for comics. And then students make them, and then they had to insert them into their assigned Google slide. So app smash, we've got Google Drawing and Google Slides. And so they had to take a chapter from the novella we were reading and go through and show what was going on in that chapter. And so this was really fun. Again, just showing what they were doing. And if you would like templates for either the Google Drawing or the Google Slides, let me know. If you want more Google Slides, these are other ways I use Google Slides. I call these my cartoon decks of Google Slides. What these are something I do for texts. And so as I go through a text, I will either illustrate it or have students illustrate it. And then I will color code the text. And so students add pictures to help remind them what the text is all about. And so that's really fun. And I'll show you a Greek example. This is again, kind of an easier example, a little more of a basic example. But here they're reading about Greek geography and they're illustrating Greek geography. Just because it helps them remember things more, I find. So that can be really neat. Google Forms. So Google Forms is something I use a lot, but especially for what I like to call my end of week check-in. And so for my end of week check-in, I ask students their name, what class they're in of mine, how they're feeling today. And those are all different feelings. I took these pictures from another teacher. I can't remember who. Someone graciously added it to a classic's website. Talk about this week I learned, this week I was successful with, and next week I want to work on, whether or not they completed all their assignments. And this is a really important question. These last two, actually. I would like my teacher to know, what do they want their teacher to know? And then how can I help you? Sometimes they say, no, I can't help. You don't need to help me. Or maybe they say, yeah, actually, I really need help with this. Or I want you to know that I'm feeling sick, so I'm not gonna be able to do my work today. But giving them a space each week to be able to check in like this is really helpful. And if you want this template, I'm happy to share. You can modify it however you see fit. It's just nice to be able to check in with students and see how they're doing, because we get less of that kind of organic check-in at the beginning of end of class, less organic check-ins in the hallway, less, just interactions. And so being able to do a quick check-in with students is really powerful. Another way that you can kind of engage students in class all at the same time is Whiteboard Fi. Has anyone used this? Okay, I find it super fun. So it doesn't require sign-ins. It doesn't require payment or anything. You create a new class, you put your name in, and then I'm pretending. And so then a whiteboard would appear if someone were to log into my class. And I could see what all of the students are drawing on the whiteboard at once if they enter in the room code. So if I want students to illustrate what we're reading, if I want students to draw something, if I want students to write out something, it's a really good option, especially if I'm not handing out whiteboards, because it's usually in a classroom, I have a whiteboard and a marker for every student and an eraser. However, that's not really that feasible this year. Sometimes I know schools have students who purchase their own whiteboard and marker and eraser for this particular year, but I'm not going to want someone having to sanitize all the whiteboards every time. And so that's why something like Whiteboard Fi might come in really handy as a feedback tool, just to see if everyone's on the same page and everyone knows what's going on. Padlet. Padlet's a really cool tool that I use sometimes. And again, I'm more of a Google Slides person, but Padlet can be really fun. This is where I had students put words that they were interested in learning more about. And so they were reading a text and then they put words. They can also add pictures. They can add links. This is a really good tool. They can also add audio. I have some colleagues who are now using it for students to submit audio for different oral testing. And so that can be really helpful as well.
Maureen, a quick question. Any reason you would pick Whiteboard Fi over a Jamboard?
Yes, you can see everybody's whiteboard at once, as opposed to Jamboard where you have to scroll through everybody's whiteboard. That's why I really like Whiteboard Fi better than Jamboard. But only as a whiteboard. For Jamboard, if you're adding text, if you're adding pictures, then I would definitely use Jamboard, or Padlet if you're going to add text, pictures, things like that. But I would use Whiteboard Fi if you're using it primarily for the whiteboarding function. Excuse me. Okay. Assessment. This is a big topic that I know has been on a lot of people's minds. It's difficult, especially having students who have access to their computers at all times, having students where you're not necessarily monitoring them all times. It can be challenging, and trying to figure out ways that assessment works best. So here are some tips that I found helpful for assessment. Assess content knowledge, not assessment type. If you're going to give students an assessment, give them a practice with the same thing you're going to use for the assessment, so that they're being assessed on the content knowledge, not how they handle a brand new assessment type. If you're going to use Go Formative for the first time, give them a practice one so they can play with it and work with it before they try to do an actual assessment on there. I think it's really important to make sure as we're using new tools, we give students an opportunity to adjust to those tools. Also, give opportunities for correction. Give students a chance to retake something. Give student a chance to make corrections on their errors. Make it so that this is a year for growing and learning. I think that's really, really helpful. Also, assess what students know. What do they know? And what can they feel confident in? This is a year where I'm seeing a lot of students having a lot of stress. And I'm trying to build a lot of student confidence, because last spring and even over the summer, I feel like some students did not learn as much last spring, or they maybe lost some confidence over the summer. And so coming back to a kind of stressful environment isn't helping a lot. So really trying to assess students on what they know and acknowledge what they know, acknowledge what they're doing well. Also, explain why you're doing what you're doing. If you're using a new tool, why are you using it? What's the point? And students will appreciate that feedback. Students will appreciate you saying, hey, I'm trying this. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'm hoping it will do this. I try that with Go Formative. It works pretty well. I've been trying with the drag and dropping, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback. And it's really important for me to get that feedback, because I'm explaining the purpose of it and then saying, did it match my purpose? Did you learn something from this? Did it help? And if I hear back, yes, it did, that's helpful. And if I have students on Zoom that are using the reactions, if I have students in person, they're still giving me thumbs up, or no, this isn't working at all. So very helpful to know. Google Forms was a problem in the spring with some people, because I know that some kids were trying to look at the source code. They have fixed that since. The students can't find the source code as easily, so they can't just find all the answers, which is good. So this is an example of a type of short answer quiz I would give. And I would do quiz mode so that I could have it self-grading. However, that doesn't mean that I would just kind of leave it. I would check all the student answers just to make sure, because there are always typos and things like that. So you don't want a student to be docked for a typo if in fact they had the correct answer. And it looks like someone might have a question. Yeah. That is a good thing that they can't see each other. So this is better for assessment. Quiz mode is great and now more secure. So this is showing a bunch of different modes that you can use for that. Go Formative is my favorite new thing. I've been using it since the spring and I absolutely love it. I'm going to show you a sample assessment. What I like best is you can give feedback to students during the assessment. And so, I don't want to show that. It's not letting me do that. There we go. Go away. And so I'm going to go back. Nope, go back here. Sorry. Trying to make it so we can't see. Oh, there we go. So this is what it looks like. What I do is actually, I always have backup because I get a little paranoid. I know with the wayfinding doc and Google Classroom, now when I'm doing my assessments, I have backup, but I'm always going to put my assessment in a Google Doc form at the top of my Go Formative, just so if something happens, if a student loses connection or something like that, they still have an access to a Google Doc. So I can, what I asked them to do is go to this Google Doc at the beginning so they have access to it. Then I would create a test. And so you do this by putting in text blocks, and you can do essay type questions. You can do, and you can add in as many answers as you think might appear. And I also did multiple choice questions here, down here. And so it's nice because students give feedback. Then at the end of every assessment, I give students opportunities to say, what went well on this assessment? What did you find challenging? What would you like your teacher to know? And draw a picture. Because sometimes at the end of a test, students just need to let off a little steam. So drawing a picture can be a really good way to do that. So that's an example of a type of assessment. That's called Show Your Work, which is with the paid version, but even the unpaid version has really good functionality for Go Formative. Google Classroom questions is another thing I use, and I'm sensitive to the time, so I won't hold you too long. But this is just something I would create a question, like a debate question that students could answer in Google Classroom. And then they could all answer, they could reply to each other's answers, which is really fun. So it makes it a debate discussion that ends up being typed online.
Maureen, a question that often comes up for teachers around assessment in these current conditions is, you know, that trying to craft something where students can produce their own authentic original work and not necessarily leave the device to check a different device to look up something. Do you have any words of wisdom around crafting assessments that will allow the students, de-stress the teacher's concern about the students looking things up and moving in that direction? What can we do to draft and create an assessment that would keep the students with us in the moment?
That's a great question. And I think that I like using Go Formative because I can see them being on it and working on it the whole time. I like doing things like Google Slides because I can see them on it the whole time. I like doing things where I can kind of monitor if my students are participating or not. I won't say there's a perfect solution. I think the best answer I've heard people come up with is make it ungoogleable, which isn't always an option, but I think that's the only thing we can really think of in this case.
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Student choice and voice, I also wanted to talk about giving students a chance to do Flipgrid, where students can respond to things. If students are going to do a presentation in class, have them practice on Flipgrid or have them do it on Flipgrid even, just to save class time. Or you could do other things with Flipgrid, like ask students, but do it on Flipgrid. So I think that can be as well. Choice boards. So I've been big into choice boards this year. This link will take you to some editable choice boards, but I wanted to show the two that I'm doing particularly this year. This is my Caesar homework choice board that my students are completing right now. And so what students are doing is, oh, come on, load. Here we go. Okay. So students complete, and you'll see I always put directions slide because I think it's really important to emphasize the power of directions. I also read them aloud. I think it's really important for students to hear them. So complete one activity from each column and put each activity on a Google slide that you add to this deck. Each student receives a copy of this, and that's how they do it. And so here I have students doing a presentation activity, an interpretation activity, an investigation activity, and an interpersonal activity. And so they must do one from each column. And at the end of each column, you'll see I created something where they create their own activity, but they get it approved by me because I want to give them some license and some creativity. Usually for a choice board like this, it's worth 100 points and students have 2.5 weeks to complete it. So that's my usual choice board. And so this is what I'm doing with them right now. And I'll show you the previous one. The previous one's a little wacky because it was the beginning of the year and I was having a little bit of fun. And so I'll show, the class is lava. My students were watching this show over the summer, which I also watched, which is Floor is Lava. And so I thought it'd be fun to do class is lava. And so rather than doing interpersonal presentational. I got this template from a teacher online. Again, I can't remember where I got it from, so I wish I could attribute it to someone, but I don't know whose it is. So if you are that person, let me know. Again, putting the directions, select activities under the furniture pieces to move your character across the lava challenge room. So here's the board. They would each have a copy. And then each of the activities would be worth a furniture piece. So feel free to steal this, adapt this, however you want to do it. And so it was really fun. They moved their little piece across, and it was just kind of a neat way to do a choice board. Oh, I see something in the chat. This would be 2.5 weeks to do this. And so this would be in lieu of other homework. It's just giving them an opportunity to show what they know in different ways. So lots of different options for them. I know I went slightly over time, so thank you for your patience. Any other questions, feel free. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes, of course, but feel free to reach out by email, latintech.tools@gmail.com. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter at Latin Tech Tools, and I can answer DMs there as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am happy to take any questions you may have.
Maureen, thank you very much. This was very informative, very timely, and so many different good ideas. And I think a few folks are looking forward to your templates and your slide deck. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, feel free to unmute and I'll call on you, or you can certainly ask the question if you want to stick around, or you can certainly email Maureen. But thank you, everybody. Enjoy the evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
And don't forget to check us out at Idioma on our website for our upcoming winter and spring term classes, and checking out some of the consultative services, coaching services that we have as well. Lisa, anything else to add in there?
We still have some great programming going on, despite us all being really busy with just managing school right now. We do still have great programming and lots of support options for you. So please feel free to reach out if you're looking for more strategies like what Maureen is presenting for us tonight, or if you're looking for even like Michael said, some coaching options. If you're looking for somebody to kind of hold your hand a little bit through this process, we're so happy. That's what we're here for, is to support you teachers. And we are teachers and working teachers ourselves too. So let's all hold hands together in a socially distant way through this process. And Maureen, we're so glad that you are willing to come in and do these free webinars with us so that we can get this out to our community. If you're not already friends with us on Facebook, go and follow our page, Idioma Education, and we're on Twitter also. And of course, keep checking back in on the website, and check your email, because we're sending stuff out that way as well.
And we will be able to share the link for the presentation with those that have registered. So we will get that out to folks by the end of the week.
Yep, I'm going to send, actually tonight, I'm going to finish this recording up and I'll send it out to you with a thank you email for coming tonight. And then we'll also post it to our YouTube. So if you go like our YouTube page and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of our content that we provide for you here is also on our YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody. Feel free to stick around and ask Maureen some questions. She's ready for you.
I have one.
Sure.
Maureen. Hi. So you didn't, I'm always curious and trying new ways of, because I'm just new at this proficiency teaching. And so I'm always trying to find new ways to bring vocab up front. And one of the things I'm having problems with is I can get them to come up with it themselves and we can make a vocab list, but it's the bringing it back all the time that I'm having trouble with. Like having them use more, having them reuse it, like where to put it so that it makes it convenient for them to find. For is it really one of the pieces? Like I put it in my Google Classroom under, I have vocab for whatever unit I'm on, but it's that those are those extra clicks it takes to get through. And sometimes I don't know whether they're using it or not. And I can tell they're not. Like today I was doing something with just doing a little bit of describing clothing, and all they used was colors, because I think they just didn't take the time to go look at anything else that I had put there. So I'm just curious if you have any suggestions for vocab and retrieval usage. I'm thinking maybe a choice board would be a good place to have that, because I'm so done with everyday homework. I need choice boards. I'm so done with having to get that every day.
It is
Oh
so
my God. And students are like, it's not on time. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so busy. I can't do it. So anyway, so I think the choice boards might be one place I go next unit, but any other suggestions?
Sure. A lot of times for Quizlet, I do Quizlet Live for vocabulary every day just to kind of give them that touchstone. You could do a drag and drop thing with the different words. So for example, you could have a picture that has the different words you wanted students to know, and then they'd have to drag the word to match the different items in the picture. I'm trying to think what other things.
I did a flippity sort the other day, which was just nouns and adjectives, and then had them pick out the ones they didn't know. So that was one thing
Mhm.
that engaged. They loved that. That was a drag sort of thing. They did love that.
Something about dragging and dropping. It's something that's very tangible for students and they love it. I'm not really sure what it is. My daughter's using it in first grade and she really loves it. And so I started using it with my Greek 1 students and realized how much they loved it. And that's how it's kind of went to all of my classes. And now even my AP Latin seniors are using it and they're loving it. So
Maybe I could have a couple bodies there, and they'd have to put draw the clothing.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll have to think about that. All
That was
right.
cool. You could have a description and then they would have to drag the appropriate clothing to the
To
body
the
that
first description. Yeah. Yeah.
straight meaning and context. That's right. That's great. You could
Yeah.
have few cartoons. I do that often where I have them either provide the captions or the pictures or both. And so for something where you wanted students to use the adjectives in action, you could have a picture and then students would have to write a sentence underneath describing it. So you could have a series of pictures that students would be describing, or you could do drag and drop. So you could have all the pictures and then the descriptions underneath and students could drag the description to each picture. So that could be an option as well.
All right, great. Those are great ideas. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the evening.
Very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome.
Good.
Melissa.
You,
Melissa,
recording.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.